Trying something new on my podcast. Just interview people and have them tell stories. Obviously, I'm trying to stick to my original principles of keeping it positive. But hey, these are the stories from the people and what they remember and what they see. So if some people say, well, I don't know if it happened that way or blah, 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 it's kind of like so many podcasts nowadays have that person telling the story the way they remember it. And Casey Johnson's lived a lot of stories. In this podcast, we talk about his dad, his mom, local guys, and so much more. What's Casey Johnson learned over time? What's his belief system? You'll hear that and more. Also, his college basketball Mount Rushmore. It's Casey Johnson. If you want to hear what you've done good, you might want to talk to somebody. But if you really want the truth, Casey Johnson, he's your guy. It's Casey Johnson right here on the Sports Buffet podcast. Talking to Casey Johnson. I've been doing the interviews more of storytelling now, and Coach Johnson's been around. He's young, but he's been around to where he's got enough good stories to tell. What got you into coaching? What made you want to coach?
Just being around my dad, who was a longtime coach in the ODAC, and going to practices and going to high school games, and he was recruiting, and I got to kind of hang around and listen to what he would say to high school players or coaches, and visiting clinics and conferences and state tournaments, and then being at all these games. I remember riding on the bus, the team bus. There was no seat for me. I had to sit on a cooler in the aisle on a 18-passenger bus. My mom and my sister got a seat. Mr. Mitchell, who was the longtime great fan of Emory and Henry. And then my dad's driving the bus. The assistant's in a seat. The players are in a seat. There's no seat for me. I'm sitting on a cooler for 4 hours going up to Eastern Mennonite in Bridgewater. And then remembering, eating at IHOP the next morning in between games, and my dad's talking to Kirby Dean, the Eastern Mennonite coach, because they happen to see them at IHOP the next morning. And that it just the camaraderie of coaches is kind of what I grew up with. So I enjoy being at games and going to games and hanging out with other coaches and talking basketball as much as I can. So that kind of got me into coaching. And then I had a terrific opportunity to go to I had a terrific opportunity to coach with Ron Bell at Marist School in Atlanta, Georgia, and for 1 year. And it was a private school, and we played all public schools in downtown Atlanta.
As you can tell, we're sitting outside, and Coach Johnson and I kind of share the same sentiment of why.
Yeah, so, and at that school was Sean McVay as a high school junior on the football team of the school I'm at. And this guy was the best coach. I've really only been around my dad as far as coaching goes, and his assistants who have, moved on to other places. But Coach Bell was terrific. He ran a very complex offense, one that took me about a month to be able to figure out. He was just a demanding and hardcore coach, and he was terrific with me bouncing ideas off of him, not taking stuff personally, not getting upset, all that sort of stuff. And it was just awesome to watch him operate as a high school coach, and this guy, swept his own floor and won 600 games. And he was as intense as anybody I'd ever seen or have yet to see coach. So yeah, that's kind of what got me into coaching. And then it's just, my mom was a teacher as well, and my dad was a professor at Emory. So that kind of, if you want to, for the most part, if you want to coach, you got to teach. So I became, when I was at Emory, certified in PE and have since been certified in driver's ed. So I enjoy it. I just love coaching and love going to camps and open gyms and practices and games and all that sort of stuff. And, you say I'm young, I'm 49, so I've been in it for, 28 years, I guess, since I graduated from Emory. So bounced around a couple places and, some good spots, some bad spots, and ended up at Altavista. So this is the longest I've been somewhere for 7 years. So, very happy with where I am and still trying to win that last game of the season, like you and I talked about the state tournament, trying to get there and win the state title. We got to the state title game during COVID and played against my high school coach, Mike Cardellaro, when he was at Perry McClure. That was odd, different. And then still trying to get back there. So,
what made it so odd and different? You talked about odd and different.
It was just a weird feeling, just a feeling in your gut that just was not normal. Because for years I cheered for him and his teams, and it was just different coaching against him in that environment as well. And we have since kind of distanced ourselves from each other, and then here recently have kind of grown to be better friends. We were not good friends after that for something different. But, just a...
Do you like coaching against people you know?
Well, I know about all the guys.
Do you like coaching against people you know or are friends with? Let me put it that way.
I would say no. I don't like coaching against Emory guys, especially because one of us is going to lose.
Right.
So a friend is going to lose. But I do like coaching against people I respect and like, I guess, because I don't know if that's hypocritical, but because I want to enjoy coaching. I hate coaching against guys that I don't like because I feel it. I start thinking about how much I hate them and don't want them to win, and then I'm not able to enjoy the game. And I want to be able to enjoy coaching.
Because respectfully, I think your dad had probably a bigger tree than you did, or than you do now.
God. Oh, there's no question.
But you get where I'm going, because if Dad's got to coach against somebody that he's either played for him or coached, you don't have that necessarily common thread right now. But you have common threads of, hey, I may know this guy because I've met him at a clinic, and
Right.
I know him.
Right? No, he didn't. He didn't have any guys that went on to be ODAC or Division III coaches. He had guys, one, Jimmy Allen, who's now back at Emory, but he went to Averett. But Emory didn't play Averett. All his assistants went on to be Division I coaches. So, there was a great article in, when March Madness was about to start a couple years back, that he had a larger Division I coaching tree than Mike Krzyzewski, which is pretty crazy.
Right.
That he put out more, but that was just his style, and I've since, I had a chance to coach in college with Hillary Scott at Lynchburg, which was a terrific experience and really helped me out on a lot of things that I was weak on as a high school coach. And I think that's really helped me in my last few years.
What's the biggest thing?
Patience, not overreacting. Hillary does a great job of, everyone gets upset or gets frustrated and not jumping off or flying off the handle, I guess the saying is. So that really taught me a lot. And then just some terrific ideas and concepts on play calling and hand signals or physical signals as opposed to verbal ones. So that people can't steal calls, because, our mutual friend Cam knows all my calls through scouting. So a lot of times I have to send a physical call to make sure guys are paying attention so they see it and they can tell everyone, so Cam doesn't hear it. and that not every coach scouts, which is what it is. I think a lot of coaches have gotten lazy through NFHS.
Is it easier to scout because of that, though?
I mean, it's easier because those same guys there were guys that were not getting on the road to go scout. I would much rather scout in person than on NFHS. I want to go to a high school game. I want to see interactions between players, coaches. I want to see which parent is hollering at which kid, and if that kid is, how mentally weak that kid is. Because if that kid's looking in the stands, then we'll take advantage of that when we play them.
And I think the biggest thing that you can pick up on coaching or scouting live versus an FHS is you can see body language live where you might not be able to see it on the video.
Correct. And I can see size, and I can hear play calls, and I can see what teams are about to get into. And then I also start looking at how we would play against them. Are they pressing? Where's their weakness? Are they able to be pressed? Are they playing man or zone or whatever? And then who their best players are. That's a big thing so that we can, use that to our advantage as best we can when we play them.
I feel like I know your dad decently just because of all the stories you've told me over time about him. Obviously, I'll never know him well or know him like you did, which is obvious. But what's the one biggest thing you learned from your dad, either basketball or non-basketball, that you impart nowadays, you think?
Don't sweat the small stuff, and there are things that you want to, back to what I was talking about with Hiller, you want to overreact on, and you need not. It's not that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things. There are a lot of people who don't know what a coach is or worry about high school sports or anything like that, and that's your livelihood here, but in other places, is it that big of a deal if we play or don't play? So a lot of times when my athletic director, Coach Spencer, tells me that, we can't get in the gym, practice got moved back, the game got canceled, and that you kind of were able to move on from stuff a lot quicker if you got to experience coaching in COVID. You had stuff got canceled all the time, and you were just scared the season was about to get canceled because you were hearing it from all these other places, and we were so fortunate that our county didn't, and it allowed us to play because that was a huge thing. And, we only played 14 games that year and had games canceled all the time. But it also gave us a chance. We were able to play LCA. We played Amherst. We'll play anybody. I've always believed in playing a tough schedule, so even though we're 1A, single A, we're playing very few single A teams during the season. We've got to play William Campbell twice. We've got to play now Smith Mountain Lake twice. But after that, the only other 1A team on our schedule for next year is Fort Chisholm, and they just lost in the state championship. So I'm going to schedule the best teams we can. I want to play Brookville twice, Rustburg twice. I don't have to. In years past, people thought Campbell County schools did. We don't, but I want to play bigger 3A schools. Teams in the Seminole are going to prepare us way more for the region tournament than getting an easy win against a crummy JRD team.
Right.
1A or 2A or whatever.
The one thing that stuck out to me, a story you told me about your dad once, is it was after a game you'd played and you'd said, what about all the points I scored? And he said, if you want to feel good, go talk to your mother. If you want the real truth, talk to me.
Well, and
I feel like that's you too, though.
Well, I don't talk to my team about stats and accolades, and we got guys that were all region or all state, and I don't know if I sent a text out. I know I didn't say anything. I don't give awards out at the end of the year. I know coaches still do. I thought that does nothing but divide your teams. So we'll go to Golden Corral, we'll go to Bowl, and no phones are allowed, but also no parents are allowed, and no awards are being given out. And the only people who speak will be the coaching staff, and then I let the seniors speak who are leaving the program. who want to say whatever they want to say, to all the, we do it with the middle school team as well as the JV team and the varsity. So whoever's there, we do it on a Sunday, where, every one of our kids is playing soccer or running track or playing baseball or something. So, the time is difficult to find, but, I felt like that was a great team bonding experience. And then my dad, it was always, everybody was treated the same, that everybody was, the best player was going to be hollered at just as much as the worst player might be, or held to the same standard, or, everyone's going to be at practice. Everyone's going to go full speed. Everyone's going to practice. There's no star treatment with us. The best player will play, and he'll be at every single practice on time, just like every other kid is. We start, our jerseys are black and white. We all start in black, just to, prove a point that we're a team above individuals. So, my dad had so many terrific stories. So many of the stories are about my mom as well. She would, at my game, she'd be on the front row right behind my bench screaming and hollering just like she did at my dad's games. But, when my dad came to my games, he would sit at the very top and wouldn't let her sit with him unless she would be quiet. So she never would. So she always sat right behind my bench screaming and hollering at refs. Did the same thing for my dad for 25 years. She didn't miss a game, which is incredible. I talked to Roger Ayers or Mike Eads, who are now big-time officials and in charge of, Mike Eads is in charge of the SEC officiating staff, and my mom told him in 1983, you don't belong anything higher than middle school girls. And then, Roger Ayers just says, how's your mom doing? She was always so into the games that you better have your head on straight or she's going to rattle you. She would scream at W&L's fraternity. They were giving my dad a tough time, and, her timing was so great. So W&L's at the free throw line, their fraternities across the way, about to sit down, so they get quiet for the kid shooting, and my mom yells out, don't wrinkle your skirts when you sit down. And then, the stories that my dad would do to guys on opposing teams who would try to trash talk him, or refs, or coaches. And I was talking to Kirby Dean, who used to coach at Eastern Mennonite for a few years, and he goes, I don't know if anyone knows this, but he was the most intimidating person, and he was. He was.
We're talking about your dad now.
My dad was so intimidating, and so many of us didn't want to fail him. We wanted him to think we were really good and tough and great people. And so, you see all these former Emory guys that are in the picture that will come by, or they're still in coaching or whatever it might be. And so many of them in coaching, and other schools you don't really see that as much. The other places, coaching trees, I don't know if they exist. And there's so many guys in the Emory coaching tree. There's over 30 guys in high school. There's 10 guys in college. There's a couple guys in the pros. There are guys that are officials now. There are guys that are just around the game. And it's because my dad did such a terrific job molding a group of guys that love to play basketball into men through being a part of the team. So, and everyone revered him. We were scared to death of him, but revered him, because he would, if he asked you to do a defensive slide shooting conditioning drill, you had a basketball, he would go get a medicine ball and do the same drill and just show you, he's going to prove that he wants you to be tough, but he's going to show how tough he is as well.
How many siblings do you have?
Just one sister.
So there's two people, two dependents in the Johnson household at a younger age. Were you more afraid of disappointing Dad or fearing like, hey, if we act out, Dad, I don't want to say Dad's going to get the belt out, but,
there was no belt.
You get where I'm going, though.
Yeah, there was a hand, and there was a spanking coming.
Could be worse.
And it was, but Mom, they were both, they're both so educated. They're world-traveled, well-read. Both have just such a breadth of knowledge. They've experienced, they were in school during the Civil Rights Movement. They were juniors and seniors in high school when their school integrated. So they've been through so much, they've seen so much, and they're both very accepting people, not closed-minded. So when you see all the closed-minded people, unfortunately in Lynchburg, with whether it's religion or politics or whatever, then it gets to be frustrating because I'm used to seeing something different. So I've got friends that are of different religions or nationalities or, whatever it might be. And, when you come into Lynchburg and it's the most closed-minded area I've been in my entire life, it gets to be frustrating.
So you're more afraid, but back to Dad real quick, you're more afraid of disappointing Dad than a punishment? Or was Mom a punisher?
Both of them could let you know that they're disappointed.
Right.
It's probably disappointment, but then as a kid, you're scared too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that this guy's capable of something. He just had a look. Right. His teeth would come out, and his chest would come forward, and you knew one thing. And when he said "case," that's what he would call me. I knew one thing. I wish I were somewhere else, and not about to take this punishment, whether it's verbal or physical or whatever.
Right.
But he was just such a great person, though, that he was so respected by everyone because he treated everyone so well. And then the guy has a chance to not go to war and volunteers for it. My granddad's the Army Chief of Staff at the time of Vietnam on the cover of Time magazine, and my dad could have easily gotten out, and he decides to go be a ranger and volunteer for war, being a recon guy. He's behind enemy lines, sneaking around, doing stuff that nobody wants to do. And then our country's gotten better. When he got back from Vietnam, he's being spit on. He's in fights because they're bad-mouthing him. And one thing he used to say was, it's an honor to be an American. We've got it so much better over here than any other country. Yet we've got people that won't stand for the flag, or they won't, I guess unite. Right. We're so far from the United States of America, it's not funny. But that's on another topic, I guess.
I'm going to take it. It really chaps you when you see somebody that's not standing for the anthem at a game.
It does, and I see a lot of anthems, and I see a lot of kids on their phone, and I see a lot of people not taking their hat off, and I see a lot of disrespect, and if they were to go to another country where, it's more communist, or you're not allowed to speak out, you're not allowed to form your own opinion publicly, if people knew how great they got it. I've got friends that live in Israel that say, bombs come over the wall all the time. How scary is that? Our country shuts down when Virginia Tech has 32 deaths. 32 deaths happen in the Middle East every day.
Right.
So we live in a great place, and my dad knew that, and so he just wanted us to be as, contributing members to society as possible. So not only he cared about basketball, but we went to class. We paid attention. We got good grades, and he took great pride in that.
We're sitting outside on Timberlake Road doing this interview, and Coach Johnson kind of looked when somebody's revving their engine a lot, which indicates to me you're more of an old school guy.
I don't know if I would say old school. With basketball per se, I would love to see what the game would be with no three-point line. Now, that would be old school. But at the same time, I love the new concepts of, basketball fundamental stuff of playing fast and shooting a lot of threes and, not playing, so slow in the game, playing a fast up-tempo game.
Did Dad ever subscribe to that?
To what?
To the fast pace.
Come on, man. We got to do better research.
No. I'm giving you the opportunity to tell me that. I know, but I'm letting you talk to the whole podcasting world.
Emory ran the Grinnell system. Right. Emory led the country in scoring.
Why did he change?
Well, it's not that he changed. One of the big reasons was he went to the Division III Final Four that used to be in Salem every year and saw that I got to have a 6'7", 6'8", four-man, and he wasn't getting that guy. So I got to be able to figure out a way to compete with these bigger schools, and the kids that he used to get from Virginia Beach or Richmond or, Northern Virginia, where all the players are, the bigger schools, you got to drive by every single ODAC school before you get to Emory.
Right.
So a lot never make it. And then a lot weren't willing to go to practice at 5:30 in the morning like we did. A lot weren't willing to get yelled at, so he's got to be able to figure out a way to still compete. And early in his career in the mid-'80s, when they won with Kevin Brown and Leon Hill and Derek Elmore and Jimmy Allen and Major Warner and Craig McLaughlin, all these guys, they ran up-tempo, and they were really physical, and, they were right there on the cusp. They were number 1, number 2 in the country each year. They never won it, but, they were in the NCAA tournament all the time. Then they were playing fast, and then, we had better individual players, not as great of a team guys, so they kind of ran more sets, or he ran the swing offense that Bo Ryan ran at Wisconsin Platteville when he was D3. And then, he kind of went back to what he was doing when he was a JV coach at Springfield, when it was just how fast can I get the ball out of one net and put it in the other net, and he would just have a stopwatch out, and how fast could he do that? So he liked playing fast. He thought the game should be played fast. And he was able to do it, so he recruited the guys necessary. He researched what he needed to do, and it was really, he was on the cusp of something really cool.
So he recruited based on the system. He didn't change
Correct.
The system. Okay. Who was the first recruit under the fast play? Do you remember?
Well, they played a year fast. They lost to Randolph-Macon 123 to 107.
I'll blame Will Sloan for that.
Man, gotta blame Sloan a lot. Sloan led has the school record in charges attempted.
Sloan's a mutual too, so we can both give him a hard time. Casey can give him, Coach Johnson, can give him more hard time than me.
He also turned to the dark side as a referee. So Sloan doesn't need to be talked about in a positive way.
He's going to hear all this, so we're just letting this go as is.
Good.
There was no first recruit.
Let's make sure we bash UVA basketball, so Sloan will really get irritated.
Take the Dodgers too, if we really want to get going with it.
Yeah.
So, but who was the first recruit or recruits under the fast system?
Man, that's Josh Cunningham, who's played at William Byrd with Cam Shepard, was a recruit under Andrew Hart at Lord Botetourt.
So these guys fit the system.
He played at Pulaski. They were smaller guys at each position. They were all able to run.
Okay.
They were all able to shoot it well. And then, he also took guys that, were already at the school. Right. Hank Luton, but they changed positions. Hank Luton changed from a forward to a point guard. That's what he was so good at. My dad too was just finding guys' styles. I ran it in high school, and we averaged 98. The problem is we gave up 104. So, like, I want to play fast now. Nothing I'm doing now is anywhere near that. But we are, probably the most up-tempo team in the area.
But I think there's a difference when people hear the term playing fast and, what it's worth. Because playing fast is not, to me, about can you shoot it quick. It's can you get it organized and shoot it quick. That's
Right.
my opinion.
No, there's a method to the madness. It's not just guys taking turns shooting. It's not just guys being selfish. It's certain guys are running to certain spots and playing as hard as you can for a minute. There's no getting loose. There's no getting warmed up. There's just that's the same clown that came by.
I love watching you when I hear a rever. I'll call it a rever.
So we played 3 different groups of 5, and one group ran a diamond, one group ran a 1-3-1, and one group ran a 2-2-1. And some would press man and as well in the half court. Someone would be locked up, and then different groups ran different things offensively. So it was really calculated, and and they put some beatings on some people. Virginia Wesleyan was 2 in the country when they beat them 128-102. I saw them beat somebody 150-110, and then I saw them lose 150-110 the next night. And it's funny, because I got the Altavista job after my dad had passed, obviously, and had not known all the officials from Altavista, and I
Right.
knew Donnie Vaden.
Right.
But I didn't know Bill Booker was from Altavista, and there was a great story of him calling Dan Woolridge, who used to be the commissioner of refs of the ODAC, saying, if I ever get Donnie Vaden and Bill Booker again at Roanoke, I'm coming up to see you personally in Lynchburg, So, just great stories, and, I just love being around the game, and now we're at March Madness, and, the best time of the year, and so it's fun to still think about, can you pick up something from all the great college games and something that you might be able to steal or add, or, it gives you a thought into, do I need to stop doing something or start doing more of something, or what position to play guys at, that sort of stuff.
A few more questions real quick if you
Yeah.
got time. Do you like doing this? Because we'll do it again. Because I want you to tell stories. That's the main point of this.
Yeah, I know, but I don't know if some of the stories I can tell can be put
I want you to talk
online.
about whatever you want to talk about, I guess. I'm just here. So that whole do your research comment, I know, but I'm letting you tell the stories.
We'll see, Bob. How much do you know?
Well, let's not give a Bob Alvis trivia quiz here because I'll be hurting. Who was Dad's first recruit?
Well, I do know that Dad's first major recruit was, and this is a great story too, was Kevin Brown, who is still the all-time leading scorer in ODAC history from 1984. And he's from, and I'm good friends with Kevin. He still lives in Fredericksburg, where he went to North Stafford High School, and then he went on and coached Ahmad Brooks in high school. He coached at, I think he was at Potomac for a year. He was at Mountain View for a few years, which is a new school up there. Not new now, but it used to be. Anyways, Kevin tells me a story of he's at his game, and this guy walks in these funky colored plaid bell bottoms, and it was my dad. That was the outfit, or I don't know if they were bell bottoms. They were plaid pants, and he was like, who's this guy? And then Kevin makes his way down to Emory, and he's shooting in the gym. My mom walks into the gym, looks in, sees Kevin. He's got these big glasses on, looks kind of goofy and nerdy. And my mom walks back to my dad's office, and she's like, what are you doing? Well, I've got a recruit on campus. He's in the gym. And my mom goes, you mean your number one recruit is that geek in the gym? And she goes, He goes, yeah. She goes, you may want to pick a different profession. This may not be for you. But, that's a great one, and he's unbelievable. But, Stan Eggleston and Eric Scott were great ones. Mike Young ended up playing for him after he went to Fork Union. And he was right around that. Kevin Brown, Eric Scott. Eric Scott's a Rustburg guy who has since passed away, unfortunately.
Well, here was my question. Who was the first recruit that young Casey went with Dad to a game that young Casey remembers?
Man, probably Leon Hill, Lynchburg's own, from Madison. But, that's the one that, I wake up in the morning and, this 6'5" guy is on my top bunk bed. There was no staying with players. They stayed with us. So, I wake up, I'm like, who are you? So, I remember that one. And that was when I was 10, so 39 years ago, So, and he and I are good friends. And that's the cool thing, is that all these former players are more like brothers to me than anything else.
And I was told that when Leon played, Leon could fly. Leon could sky, is what I was told.
Sky, yeah.
Sky, like jump.
Yeah, fly is run.
Okay.
Sky is jump. No, I don't know if he's a great jump. He's just a terrific basketball player. I heard a great story from the Virginia Wesleyan coach who's just retired from UT Dallas, Terry Butterfield, and he said Leon hit a three in front of him just to end the half to put Emory up 45-12, and he turns around to Terry Butterfield and goes, All-American, which is pretty great. But, and Leon's kids, Caleb and Emory, just have both graduated from EC Glass, which is in the area, and, that's given me a chance to go watch them. Emory was a swimmer and Caleb a football lacrosse kid. So, yeah, the recruits have been throughout the years, and I still stay up to date with how Emory's doing, and actually talked to Jimmy Allen yesterday. So it's really a small, tight-knit family, or a big, tight-knit family, and we try to all stay close.
I always joke that Leon is the winner of the Michael Strahan lookalike contest.
Yep. Unfortunately, he's a Giants fan, so he takes that as a compliment.
Takes that as a badge of honor. Okay, final question for now. And I didn't tell you this one was coming. Give me your coaching Mount Rushmore, not counting Dad. So Dad cannot be in this one, but you're coaching Mount. And you brought up March Madness, so that's kind of what brought it to my head.
Gosh, I would go. And I would say Izzo. I would say, this is a weird one, I would say John Chaney.
Okay. Former Temple coach.
Ran that crazy kind of matchup zone I really liked. He's not on the Mount Rushmore.
If kids aren't familiar with John Chaney, Google John Chaney and John Calipari.
I'm not a Carolina, Duke, Virginia fan.
Okay.
So I'm not picking Krzyzewski. I'm not picking Dean Smith. Dean Smith, although invented, four corners, Dean Smith's got to be on there.
Okay.
Wooden cheated his tail off recruiting, and buying players. But they won a ton of games with great players. Wooden's got to be on there. So I'm going to say so I'd put Wooden, I'd put Dean Smith. Bob Knight was a terrific coach. He was an awful human being. He dodged a draft, and my dad called him a beep continuously.
Okay.
Because he did dodge the draft, which was soft as hell. But, he probably, Don Meyer was a terrific coach. Don Meyer was up there. Pete Newell was kind of the big guy with big men. And then I think those guys are definitely all on there.
So Mount Rushmore is extended from about 4 to about 7.
So let's go. Let's go Wooden, Dean.
Well, I don't want to pressure you.
That's fine. I know it's only 4. Wooden, Dean, Knight, and I've got to probably put Paul Westhead for Loyola Marymount offense.
I think a lot of people are going to love this podcast.
Yeah. Thanks, Bob.